Power Rangers. I am so glad that this movie exists. Before I go into the movie, I'm going to give just a little personal history, my personal experience with the show. To be honest, when the show first came out, um, the first episode I ever saw, I kind of stumbled right in the middle of it, and it was just this. What I caught was this goofy scene of the Power Rangers fighting this big eyeball monster, and as soon as I saw it, that was the one scene I saw. I wasn't really into Godzilla or like people in rubber costumes. That just wasn't the stuff I was into. So I was kind of turned off by it, and I kind of dismissed it, even as a little kid when it came out, as kind of just a kid show, and it wasn't for me, even though I was a kid. But at school, a lot of the kids were talking about it. You know, a lot of my friends were into it and talking about, hey, did you see that episode? And I was like, really? Power Rangers? It seemed kind of stupid. And they were like, no, you got to watch it. And it kind of just recently struck me that Power Rangers is not, maybe it's not the kind of show where you walk into the middle of an episode, because it's all over the place. It's very wacky. So I watched an episode from the beginning, and there was something about it that got me hooked. I don't know if it was the colorful monsters or if it was the Zords, because those were kind of cool, or if it was just the fact that Amy Jo Johnson was extremely hot. I had a really big crush on Amy Jo Johnson, still kind of do. But there's just a lot of things that got me interested in the show. People talk about the cheesiness factor and the costumes and the Zords and the people in rubber suits and everything, but there was an actual storyline there. It was one of the only shows I know of that had a 5-parter, the whole Green Ranger miniseries, which a lot of shows, they have like 2-parters and 3-parters, but 5-parters, you don't see that a whole lot. And it did deal with some realistic troubles. For example, I remember the episode where it dealt with Kimberly's parents being divorced, which for a show like Power Rangers, you don't think of stuff like that, but it has, over the years, been compared to like Saved by the Bell in a weird kind of way. So anyway, something happened to me, unfortunately. A lot of kids go through this. I begrudgingly was forced to move, to change school districts, and the school that I went to in middle school, starting in the 6th grade, was literally 5 minutes away from where I went to elementary school. And the kids at this new school didn't watch Power Rangers, and I was made fun of quite a bit for it. And it was just one more thing that they could use to make fun of me for, because I was the new kid and I was very antisocial and kind of weird. And I guess a lot of these kids at this new school thought they were more mature than they really were. I really don't know. But I went from a school that's all we talked about was Power Rangers to a school that made fun of me for it. And for many years, I still continue to watch it in a season 2 up until somewhere in season 3. Up until they started changing. When most of the original cast was no longer there, I stopped watching. But it was something that I had to do kind of, by myself in a dark corner. I couldn't talk to anybody about it because nobody at my new school watched it, and I was considered too old or whatever. I don't know. And again, that's why I said I'm very glad that this movie came out when it did, because of course back then there was no internet, so I couldn't justify liking it. My brother, who was 5 years younger than me, was into it as well, and my parents he was one that got all of the really cool toys and everything. He had out most of the Zords and the big 12-inch figures. My parents just thought that it was for his age and not mine. But now there's a ton of people coming out, mainly, a lot of it because of this movie coming out and talking about their experiences with Power Rangers. And these are not, these are people who have big YouTube channels. These are not people in their 20s that remember it when they were kids. So a lot of these people are actually a couple years older than me. I was in the theater today, and there was a guy who, he had to be older than me. And he was having a geek argument about the Dragon Zord with, I guess, his wife or whoever he was with. And I was like, I just kind of wish that when I was a kid, I didn't have to feel and I know kids are cruel, but I kind of think of this movie as just a big middle finger to all the jerks that gave me a hard time for it, because a lot of people enjoyed it. And this movie would not be coming out if it wasn't big. And I'm just really glad that there's a lot of people that are coming out that are sharing their experiences with it, and we're different age groups, So, the movie, Power Rangers. First, the good. There's already been a ton of reviews and YouTubers and things like that who've reviewed the film. I didn't get a chance to watch it till today, but typically what I've been hearing is that it's good. It's not great, but it's definitely better than what a lot of people thought. I thought it was okay. I thought it was pretty good. I didn't know what to expect. The trailers didn't really get my attention because honestly, the trailers looked really bad, especially with the digital effects. And for those who know me, I don't mind CGI or digital effects that much. It's fine. I've accepted that that's just how movies are made. I wasn't expecting to go. I would have probably not gone to see it if they had people in costumes in a movie in 2017 doing it. But I think the thing that bothered me the most about the CGI from the trailers was, and it's been compared to like the Michael Bay Transformers movies, the Zords and even Goldar, who you see in the trailers a lot, they have that kind of jumbled Transformers look, and I'm not a fan of that. And the trailers and even most of the movie, when like the Zords came out, for example, I had a hard time telling which was what, aside from that like the Tyrannosaurus was red and the woolly, the Mastodon was black and that kind of thing. Like most of these Zords, aside from the Tyrannosaurus and maybe the Pterodactyl, they don't look anything like what they're supposed to look like, at least to me. And in the trailers, that kind of bothered me. There's also, you see, I think, brief shots of the putties in the trailer. The same thing, like they just don't look like they have a very solid structure. They all look a bunch of robotic pieces thrown together, and I don't like that look. It looks like they couldn't decide on a decent design, so they gave it a Transformers look, and that's why I don't like the Transformers design of them, at least, because they just don't feel like anybody really designed them. It looks like someone just couldn't come up with a design and threw a bunch of parts together, and there we go. So I wasn't a fan of that. But at the same time, what I'm gathering from what a lot of critics have said about the film is that the biggest flaw is the tone. They couldn't really decide on a tone. They couldn't decide whether to make it a goofy, campy, kind of cheesy movie all the way, or to make it this gritty, kind of new age superhero film. And yeah, I kind of feel the same way. My feeling on that, though, is even though I'm probably one of the few people who will admit that I actually enjoy the 1995 Power Rangers movie, I thought that was a decent representation of the show at the time. You can say what you want about the story and the dialogue and a lot of the cheesy moments and the bad CGI, but it's a very goofy film, and I'm kind of surprised that people who really enjoyed the show, as cheesy as it was, didn't like that movie. And a lot of people are actually saying they like the second movie, Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, better because at least it represented the show better. But that's what annoyed me about that is the Power Rangers movie from '95 at least felt like a movie, and the second one felt more like a theatrical version of the show. It felt like a longer version of the show. It didn't even feel like it needed to be in theaters. So that being said, I know I'm kind of being sidetracked a little bit, but I went into this, especially with the trailers, I didn't want a movie that was going to be completely cheesy. I was expecting a little bit of an edge to it and a little bit of grit to it. And this movie definitely has that. Where it gets into kind of cheesy mode is when they get the costumes on and they start fighting the putties and Goldar and all that, which happens, I think, like the last maybe half an hour, if that. It doesn't feel like they're really fighting a whole lot, and I'll get into that in a minute. That's really not a big problem for me, but as soon as they did that, it kind of started to feel like the show a bit, and I was kind of surprised. And what I want to say about that is it's a tough balancing act, and I think they did probably as good of a job with that as they could have. Because again, I didn't want it to go full cheese, but they have just enough in there to kind of let the fans of the show have fun with it, and I kind of enjoyed that aspect of it as well. Elizabeth Banks, who played Rita, I thought she did a really good job, and she was like one of the most over the top parts of the movie. She wasn't in the movie as much as I thought she'd be, surprisingly, but when she did show up, she was kind of playing like the evil space witch kind of thing, and she had her own kind of spin on it. It's not the exact same thing, and at the beginning of the film, they do give a backstory for like why she's doing what she's doing, her motivations, her relationship with the Zordon. I won't go into that. I don't want to get into spoiler territory here. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good blend, and it should be a good blend because, I mean, that's why it's rated PG-13, right? It's because you want to capture the audience who saw the show as kids, but you don't want to alienate other people too. You want other people to be interested in the movie, and there's a certain aspect of Power Rangers that is it's not gonna capture everybody. Okay, because like I said, when I first saw the show as a kid, I didn't like it. I thought it was kind of stupid till I kind of stuck around and saw full episodes of it. But I didn't really care for the people in costumes. To be honest, maybe not so much now. Well, maybe now, I don't know. But when the movie came out, I was glad that the Zords were CGI, even though it was very primitive and not very well done at all. I like the fact that at least they looked cinematic, more cinematic than the people in the costumes. And believe me, I know that not everybody feels that way, but I do. And so I'm kind of glad that the film had that grit. So what this movie is, it's an origin story. And Power Rangers has had so many iterations. It's not like Batman or Spider-Man where every time they do an origin story, it's the same thing. Power Rangers has had so many seasons over so many years with so many different characters being switched in and out that this kind of made sense to make a reboot and to do an origin story. And we kind of get an origin story that I don't think the show really touched upon, as far as I know. So it's kind of a fresh start. And what this movie is, that you've probably heard from other reviewers, is that it's very character driven. They do a really good job of bringing these characters together and making you feel for them. Are they like, I don't know, for a Power Rangers movie? That's all I'll say. I mean, that's, like I said, this isn't a great, fantastic movie in that regards, but I got more than what I was expecting. I won't say that, because I thought that the characters were pretty fleshed out in the show too. But what's funny is, like, during the opening credits of the show, Zordon says, "Alpha, I need 5 teenagers with attitude." And then, the cast, the original 6 cast members in the show are goody goods. And that's not what this group is. This group in this film are misfits. They're all kids that get thrown in detention. There are no goody goods. They're the misfits. They're the unpopular kids. The leader, Jason, who was the leader in the original, he's like on his way to getting a football. He's a big football player for his school and everything, and he kind of throws it all away by pulling off this stunt at the beginning of the movie, which I thought was kind of funny, but there are some serious repercussions to it. And then you've got the one guy, Zach, who is not black in this movie. He's of Asian descent. And that's the other thing about this movie too that'll kind of throw you off, is they kind of mix around the physical identities of the Rangers. Like, for example, Billy in this one is the African American, which it kind of threw me off at first, but I mean, that's fine, that's expected. But yeah, Billy is the brains like he is in the show, and he's very I don't know if I've heard him described as autistic or ADD. It's not really, they don't say what he is in the movie. I don't know if it's autism, because I have, my brother's borderline autistic, so I'm not sure if that's what it is. But he's just very jittery and very kind of all over the place, and he's very OCD. So they played on that a lot, and it was kind of fun to watch him doing that. You've got, Zach, his mom he's got a mother that's like in her deathbed, and he has to take care of her. And they have this moment where they're like at a campfire, and they've been Power Rangers for a couple of days, but they can't morph. And they're trying to figure out why they can't morph, so they just get to know each other, and moments like that are really sweet, and I wasn't expecting it, and that's one of the things, again, that this movie does really well. There's a montage where right after they get the power coins and they've met Zordon and they band together, there's a montage of them kind of learning their powers and trying to be a team, training and things like that, and that was really sweet. Especially, there's a little scene in a restaurant where Trini and Kimberly are kind of doing these things together, and they're getting along, and they're like polar opposites of each other, which I really liked. The one thing I will say, though, that did kind of bother me is there were moments in the movie, I mean, there were moments where they felt like they were anti-heroes. There are all these kids that don't like being in Angel Grove, because that's where the show took place. They don't like the city they're in because they are kind of the outcasts. And there's a line where Jason goes, "As much as I hate this town, I still want to save it." And it's not like the Ninja Turtles, who are like, "We love this town and we want to save it." It's like their only choice in this movie, in the Power Rangers, is to save this town even though they don't like it. And it made them come off as anti-heroes. It made it a little harder to root for them. There's also a line where, and I don't want to spoil too much again, but one of the characters, it's revealed, one of the characters doesn't believe they're worthy to be a Power Ranger because they've done bad things. They did one thing in particular, and they allude to it. They don't exactly tell you what they did. Just something stupid that like a high school prankster would do, and then they have this conversation, and Jason goes, just because you do a bad thing doesn't mean you're a bad person. Just move on. Yeah, it is kind of a tough argument. And look, I'm the first person to say that not every movie has to have a big moral message. This is basically a superhero movie for the generation that watched the show in the 90s. I'm not expecting a big moral message, but as a superhero movie, there are going to be people, little kids especially, that kind of look up to these guys, and it's a little harder to do that when you've got kind of mixed messages like that in there. So I can kind of understand why that would be a problem for some people, and me, again, like, I'm glad that they weren't goody goods, but it almost went too dark to a point. So hopefully, like I said, the characters, they blend well together, but it's a very stark contrast from the goody goods who never got detention and were always like helping out with school projects and everything, Earth Day and all this stuff. Like every episode, they were like trying to save the environment, and a lot of the monsters in the show actually were like trying to whip environmental messages at people. So I'm glad it didn't do that. But at the same time, it's like, well, do they all have to be in detention? I mean, can't like one of them, it was kind of weird. It made me, again, feel like they were kind of anti-heroes. The digital effects, again, my mind didn't change that much from what I saw in the trailers. I didn't really like the look of Goldar. I would have preferred if he had been like a big werewolf creature that talked, if he had a face that like he did in the show. And I would have liked to, have heard that voice, because that voice cracks me up. But he's just this big golden monster. And the Zords, the putties, again, nothing really had any definition. Everything had the kind of mashed together Transformers look. I like the look of the Tyrannosaurus, and also during the action at the end when they they're in their suits, they call their Zords, they start fighting off Goldar. The Zords actually fight individually, and that was pretty cool. What I didn't like about all that was by the time the Rangers have figured out how to morph and how to get their Zords, and they start fighting Goldar, they spend a good chunk of that battle kind of destroying cities and goofing around and figuring out how to control things. They don't really fight Goldar that much. And the overall battle, when it's all said and done, is very anticlimactic. I wasn't sitting there really the whole time going like, come on, I want to see their suits. I want to see them in their suits, because I was invested in the characters. But by the time that they got into their suits and they started going in their Zords, there isn't much to that battle, really. So that was really, really kind of off-putting and kind of, again, anticlimactic. I thought that was kind of disappointing. I would have liked to maybe, even if they had morphed maybe 10 minutes earlier and they were given some time to like practice with their Zords a little bit, and then they would have really gotten into it. Because when they fight Goldar, that fight is really unimpressive. I'm sorry. That's just my opinion, but I wanted to see more of that. And then they do join together to form the Megazord. And another disappointing aspect is you don't actually see the Zords connect. Basically, all of the Zords kind of fall into this pit, and then the next thing you know, the Megazord emerges. And I would have really liked to see, because that was one of the coolest aspects of the show, was being able to see the Zords connect and everything into Megazord. That's why we own the toys. We like to take all of these toys that were like $100 a piece, these giant Zords, and actually put them together to make Megazord. And we don't get that moment. Now, as for the design of Megazord, I know some people have said that he didn't really resemble what he did in the show. Certain aspects do. He's got the kind of the horns. The pterodactyl is on his back. So he does kind of resemble the show. And there's a moment where when they're in the Megazord, they all come together. They actually do this close-up shot of showing where each of the Power Rangers are located in the Megazord, which I thought was all right. And then they were all going like, oh, I'm controlling the leg, and you control the leg, and you got an arm? Oh, well, you control an arm. And then Kimberly controls the pterodactyl part. So I thought that was pretty cool. But by the time they figure out who controls what aspect of the Megazord, they pretty much just, I think they like raise their sword and they punch Goldar and they kick him, and that's it. I'm serious. Like, it's not a very in-depth fight. So that whole battle sequence, by the time, you know, from the morphing to the Zords to them combining Megazord, doesn't last all that long. And I would have liked a little more of that. Maybe even if it was spread out a little more. But again, like I said, I wasn't too disappointed at the first half of the movie, at least, because I enjoyed these characters enough. And none of them are really unlikable. There's a moment where Billy keeps getting picked on by a school bully who's not a Power Ranger, just a school bully. And Billy, being the geek, can't really defend himself. And Jason, who's the big football jock, steps in and protects Billy from the bully. And I wasn't expecting that because the football jock and the nerds typically don't interact. So I thought that was kind of sweet. So I liked where all these characters were going. They do focus on, I think, Jason and probably Billy more, and maybe Kimberly a little bit more. Zach and Trini, they don't really focus on all that much. But again, they were little sweet moments. I like the moment in the trailer where the mom sets down the cup and she's like, pee in this cup. I liked stuff like that. It had an edge to it that I wasn't really expecting going in. Final verdict, it was better than what I thought. It was all right. If you were a big Power Rangers fan, as I probably was back in the day, I'd say give it a watch. Don't go in expecting too much, but don't be too hard on it either, because I really felt that being Power Rangers, I thought they pretty much did it justice, and it's a fine balancing act of, you know, kind of cheesy and over the top and kind of trying to be serious. And I really thought that for the most part, they got that right. I just think that they could have focused a little more on the action scenes, and in the next film, I'd really like to see, like, colorful monsters. Does it have to be over the top, like a giant pig wearing a Marvin the Martian helmet, or, you know, a turtle with a traffic light on its head? No, but something fun. I mean, it's been commented on before that, like, for example, the Japanese Godzilla movies, even though the monsters in those are really kind of over the top and goofy looking, you can't really take them that seriously. They're creative as hell. And the American versions can't really get that right for some reason. They're just not that creative. Everything has that kind of blah Transformers look, and Goldar had that look, the Zords had that look. Although, again, I like the Tyrannosaurus in this film, but that's the only one that actually looked like a Tyrannosaurus. Like, everything else, I couldn't tell that was a Mastodon. I couldn't tell that the saber-toothed tiger and the Triceratops, I almost forgot what the Zords were supposed to be because they don't really resemble anything. It's just a hodgepodge of CGI, really. So hopefully the next one, they'll add a little more cheesiness to it and take a little more risk with the design of these characters, because honestly, I really think they got something here. And again, I'm glad this movie came out because, you know, I was glad to see it, and it was a pretty packed theater for a Sunday. There were a lot of people in this theater. So I'm not the only one that enjoyed Power Rangers. So thanks for watching my video. If you haven't checked it out and you were a big Power Rangers fan, go see it. If you weren't a Power Rangers fan, you know, go watch something else. Thanks for watching my video, and keep checking out my channel for more videos coming soon. Thanks.